The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. For millennia, Jedi and Sith alike believed they understood the fundamental nature of reality itself. But what happens when something from beyond the stars arrives, something the Force cannot touch, cannot predict, cannot explain? What happens when pure magic, older than hyperspace and untethered to midi-chlorians, crosses the threshold into a galaxy far, far away? The twin suns of Tatooine were setting over the Dune Sea when reality tore open. No hyperspace signature, no ion trail, no gravitational distortion that any sensor in the Mos Eisley spaceport could detect. One moment, the evening sky glowed amber and crimson with the last light of Tattoo 1 and Tattoo 2. The next, a streak of impossible colors, green and red and gold, split the heavens like a knife through fabric. The sound that followed wasn't the roar of engines or the scream of atmospheric entry. It was bells, sleigh bells, crystalline and joyful, ringing across the desert wastes where no such sound had any right to exist. The object that descended defied every principle of aerodynamics. It was a sleigh, an ornate wooden sleigh trimmed in gold and silver, pulled by 9 massive reindeer whose hooves struck the air as though it was solid ground. At the reins sat a figure in red and white, his beard flowing like snow, his eyes twinkling with an inner light that had nothing to do with the Force. Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, Father Christmas, Kris Kringle had just entered the Star Wars galaxy, and he looked thoroughly confused. The sleigh touched down in a cloud of sand just outside Mos Eisley, the reindeer snorting and pawing at the unfamiliar ground. Santa stood, brushing dust from his crimson coat, and gazed around at a landscape that was decidedly not Earth. The architecture was all wrong, domed buildings and moisture evaporators instead of chimneys and rooftops. The sky held 2 suns instead of 1, and in the distance, the silhouette of a massive star destroyer hung in orbit like a dagger pointed at the planet's heart. "Dasher, Dancer," Santa murmured, stroking the lead reindeer's muzzle. "I don't think we're in the North Pole anymore." Inside Mos Eisley, the cantina had just begun its evening business when word spread of the impossible arrival. Spacers, smugglers, and bounty hunters gathered at viewports and doorways, staring at the sleigh that gleamed in the fading light. Greedo, the Rhodian, clicked his translator in disbelief. A Wookiee named Chewbacca growled a question to his companion, a Corellian smuggler who just shook his head. Even the Jawas, usually eager to scavenge anything remotely technological, kept their distance. The sleigh radiated something that made their primitive sensors screech with feedback. Not energy, not heat, but something older. Something that felt like childhood memories and winter mornings and the scent of cookies baking. The Empire noticed immediately. Aboard the Star Destroyer Devastator, orbiting high above Tatooine, a junior sensor officer stared at his console in growing panic. "Sir, we have an unidentified contact on the surface. It appeared without any hyperspace signature, no energy readings at all, but there's definitely something there." Commander Praji leaned over the console, his face hardening. "Scan it again. Full spectrum analysis." "Sir, the sensors can't get a lock. It's like it doesn't exist, but our visual confirms." "Launch a probe and alert Lord Vader. He'll want to know about this." In his meditation chamber deep within the Devastator, Darth Vader felt the disturbance the moment it happened. Not through the Force, that was the strangest part. The Force showed him nothing, as though the arrival occurred in a blind spot of reality itself. Yet something had changed. The dark side whispered of an anomaly, a presence that existed outside the natural order. Vader's respirator hissed in the silence as he stood, his black cape settling around his shoulders like the wings of some mechanical bird of prey. "Prepare my shuttle," he commanded through the intercom. "I will investigate this personally." Back on the surface, Santa had begun to understand his situation with the clarity that came from centuries of Christmas Eves navigating the impossible. He was far from home, farther than he'd ever been. The magic that normally guided him back to the North Pole felt stretched thin, a thread connecting him across dimensions that he couldn't quite follow back. He could sense children here, millions of them across this strange world and beyond, but their hearts were clouded with fear, oppression, and a darkness he'd never encountered before. A group of stormtroopers approached across the sand, their white armor gleaming in the twilight. They moved with military precision, blasters raised, forming a perimeter around the sleigh. The lead trooper activated his helmet comlink. "Unidentified vessel. Power down and identify yourself. You violate Imperial space." Santa raised his hands in a peaceful gesture, his expression jovial despite the weapons aimed at him. "Gentlemen, there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just trying to find my way back to—" "Step away from the vehicle, now." The reindeer stomped nervously, Rudolph's nose beginning to glow bright red, a warning sign that Santa recognized. He placed a calming hand on the nearest reindeer's flank. "Easy, Prancer. These men are just doing their job." He turned back to the stormtroopers with his characteristic smile, the kind that had melted the hearts of skeptical children for millennia. "I'm Santa Claus. Perhaps you've heard of me? I bring gifts to good children on Christmas Eve, though I must say I don't recall Tatooine being on my route this year." The stormtroopers exchanged glances. One of them spoke into his comlink. "Sir, the intruder claims to be Santa Claus, some kind of gift giver. Request instructions." Static crackled. Then a cold voice responded. "Detain him. Lord Vader is en route." Santa's eyes narrowed slightly. He'd heard that name in the whispers of the Force-sensitive energy that permeated this galaxy. Not the Force itself, but something parallel to it, something his magic could sense like a wolf sensing another predator's territory. Vader. The name carried weight, darkness, and the echoes of children's nightmares. As the stormtroopers moved to surround him, Santa reached into his coat, a gesture that made every blaster track toward him, and pulled out a small wrapped package, red paper, green bow, perfectly tied. He tossed it gently toward the lead trooper, who caught it reflexively. "A gift," Santa said simply, "for you." The trooper stared at the package as though it might explode. His companions kept their weapons trained on Santa, but curiosity won out. Slowly, the trooper pulled his helmet off, revealing a young man, barely out of his teens, with scared eyes and a trembling jaw. He tore open the wrapping. Inside was a small hollow disc. When he activated it, an image appeared, a woman and a small child, smiling, waving. The trooper's breath caught. That's my wife, my daughter. I haven't seen them in 2 years since I enlisted." "TK-421, Santa said softly, reading it from some invisible list only he could see. "You've been very good this year. You send most of your credits home. You help your squad mates when they're struggling. You deserve to see them again." The trooper looked up, tears streaming down his face. Around him, the other stormtroopers lowered their weapons slightly, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. This wasn't in their training. This wasn't a rebel ambush or a smuggler's trick. This was something none of them had any protocol for. In the sky above, a Lambda-class shuttle descended through the atmosphere, black and angular against the darkening sky. Darth Vader was coming, and Santa Claus had just given his first gift in a galaxy that had forgotten what it meant to hope. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The sleigh bells chimed softly in the desert wind, and across Tatooine, children stopped what they were doing, sensing something they couldn't name, something wonderful, something dangerous, something that would change everything.
The Lambda-class shuttle touched down with imperial precision, its landing gear crushing the sand into compressed glass beneath the weight of the Empire's authority. The boarding ramp descended with a hydraulic hiss, and from within the darkness emerged Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith. His cape billowed in the desert wind as he strode forward, each footfall deliberate, mechanical breathing echoing across the dunes like the approach of death itself. The stormtroopers immediately snapped to attention, though TK-421 still clutched the holodisc with trembling hands. Santa remained by his sleigh, one hand resting gently on Dasher's flank, his expression calm but watchful. He'd faced skeptical adults before, parents who'd lost their wonder, cynics who'd forgotten how to believe, but this was different. Vader wasn't simply a non-believer, he was a wound in the fabric of joy itself, a black hole where light and hope went to die. Vader stopped 10 paces away, his masked face tilting slightly as he studied the figure in red and white. He reached out with the Force, probing, searching for the intruder's presence in the cosmic web that bound all living things. Nothing. The sleigh registered as wood and metal, the reindeer as organic life forms with unusual biosignatures, but the man himself was a void, not empty like a non-Force being, but simply absent from the Force's perception entirely, as though he existed in a different layer of reality. "Who are you?" Vader's voice was a mechanical rasp, devoid of warmth. Santa smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes this time. "I've had many names across many years, Lord Vader, but most know me as Santa Claus. I bring joy to children, I reward goodness, and I've just arrived in your galaxy quite by accident." "There are no accidents." Vader circled slowly, his respirator hissing. "You appeared without hyperspace signature. You emit no energy readings. You are invisible to the Force itself. Explain how this is possible." "The Force?" Santa's eyes brightened with understanding. "Ah, yes, I can feel it. The energy that binds your galaxy together. Beautiful, really, though tragically out of balance at the moment. But my magic doesn't come from your Force, Lord Vader. It comes from something older. Belief, wonder, the pure joy of children who still know how to hope." Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber hilt, his crimson blade humming in the twilight. "You speak of the Jedi teachings, hope, light, outdated philosophies that nearly destroyed the galaxy. The Emperor has brought order. Your talk of magic and joy is sedition." "Is it sedition to want children to smile?" Santa's voice remained gentle but carried an undercurrent of steel. "I've been watching, Lord Vader. Since I arrived, my awareness has been expanding across this world. I can sense every child on Tatooine, the slave children in the moisture farms, the orphans in Mos Espa, the young ones who've forgotten what it means to play. And I can see their hearts, every single one." He took a step forward, and despite Vader's imposing presence, it was the Sith Lord who seemed suddenly smaller. "Including the heart of the child you used to be. Anakin Skywalker, a slave boy who dreamed of freeing others, who believed in heroes, who loved with a passion that the Jedi feared and the Sith exploited." The temperature around Vader dropped 10 degrees. Frost formed on his armor plating. "That name means nothing to me. Anakin Skywalker is dead." "No one is ever truly beyond redemption," Santa said quietly. "I've seen the worst humanity has to offer, Lord Vader. I've looked into the hearts of those who've committed terrible acts, but I've also seen that even the smallest spark of goodness can grow if given the chance. You still have that spark, buried deep, surrounded by darkness and pain and self-hatred, but it's there. I can see it." Vader's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss, the crimson blade humming in the twilight. "You see nothing. You are a fool who has wandered into forces beyond your comprehension. The Emperor will want to study you, to understand how you hide from the Force. You will come with me. Cooperate, or I will take you by force." Santa didn't move, didn't flinch. The reindeer behind him tensed, Rudolph's nose glowing brighter, Comet's antlers lowering in a defensive posture. "I cannot go with you, Lord Vader. I have work to do. There are children across this galaxy who need to remember what hope feels like, what joy feels like. You've created an empire built on fear, but fear is temporary. Joy is eternal." "Then you will be detained." Vader raised his hand, attempting to seize Santa with the Force, to crush his windpipe or lift him bodily from the ground. The Force responded to his will, dark side energy coiling around the space where Santa stood and slid off like water from oil. Santa remained unmoved, physically untouchable by the power that had brought entire civilizations to their knees. Vader's respirator hitched, the closest thing to surprise he'd shown in years. He stepped forward, lightsaber raised for a physical strike, but before the blade could descend, Rudolph leapt between them. The red-nosed reindeer's nose flared with brilliant crimson light, not the heat of a weapon, but something else, pure Christmas magic, concentrated and defensive. The light struck Vader's lightsaber, and for a moment the Sith Lord saw something impossible reflected in that glow. A memory of snow, of Padme laughing, of Shmi Skywalker singing a lullaby. The vision lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough to make him stagger back. Enough! Vader deactivated his lightsaber, his breathing ragged. Stormtroopers, fire at will. Blaster bolts erupted from a dozen rifles, crimson energy lancing towards Santa and his sleigh. But Santa was already moving, and he moved with a speed that defied his rotund appearance. His hands swept through the air, and from nowhere, from everywhere, gifts appeared. Wrapped packages materialized mid-flight, intercepting every blaster bolt. Each package absorbed the energy and burst open, revealing not weapons, but toys. Dolls, speeder models, stuffed Ewoks, wooden puzzles. They clattered to the sand, harmless and incongruous, a battlefield suddenly littered with the detritus of childhood wonder. "Into the sleigh," Santa commanded his reindeer, leaping aboard with surprising agility. Dasher and Dancer reared up, their hooves striking the air, and suddenly the sleigh was lifting, not with repulsor lifts or ion engines, but with pure magic, the same force that carried it around Earth in a single night. The bells chimed as they rose, a sound that made every stormtrooper pause despite their training, a sound that reminded them of something they'd lost. Vader watched them ascend, his fists clenched. "All units, pursue that vessel. I want it shot down immediately." TIE fighters screamed down from orbit, their distinctive howl cutting through the evening air. Twin ion engines blazed as they locked on Santa's sleigh, their targeting computers struggling to maintain acquisition on something that barely registered as real. The pilots opened fire, green laser bursts converging on Santa's position. But the sleigh jinked and wove through the barrage with impossible grace, the reindeer navigating three-dimensional space as easily as they navigated Earth's atmosphere. Santa's laughter boomed across the communications frequencies, not mocking, but genuinely joyful, the sound of someone doing exactly what they were born to do. "On Dasher, on Dancer, on Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, and Rudolph, light the way!" Rudolph's nose blazed like a star, a beacon of red light that momentarily blinded the TIE fighter sensors. The Imperial pilots broke formation, disoriented, and in that moment, Santa's sleigh accelerated to impossible speeds. Not hyperspace, something else, something that bent reality around the axis of belief and wonder. The sleigh streaked across Tatooine's surface, heading towards the populated areas, towards the cities where children waited unknowingly for a miracle. In the Devastator's command bridge, officers scrambled to track the anomaly. "Sir, the target is headed towards Mos Espa. Speed is inconsistent. It's accelerating beyond anything our sensors can properly measure. Orders?" The captain glanced at the viewport where Vader's shuttle was returning. "Maintain pursuit. Deploy all available TIE squadrons, and send word to the Emperor. He needs to know about this immediately." Far below, in the slave quarters of Mos Espa, a young Twi'lek girl pressed her face against a cracked window. She was 7 years old, sold to a parts dealer by a family that couldn't afford to feed her, and she'd long ago stopped believing in anything good. But something made her look up at the sky, some instinct, some whisper of magic that transcended language and species. And there, silhouetted against the rising moons, she saw something impossible. A sleigh pulled by flying reindeer and a figure in red and white who waved directly at her. The girl's eyes widened. For the first time in 3 years, she smiled. Santa saw that smile from a kilometer away, saw it the way he always saw children's joy, instantly, intimately, as though he were standing right beside her. He reached into his infinite bag of gifts and pulled out a package wrapped in blue and silver, her favorite colors, though he'd just met her. With a gesture, he sent it spiraling down towards her window, guided by magic that knew exactly where it needed to go. The package slipped through the bars of her window and landed softly in her hands. Inside, she found a metal bird, a mechanical songbird that, when wound up, sang lullabies in her mother's voice, the voice she barely remembered. And beneath it, a note in a language she could somehow read despite never learning it. You are not forgotten. You are loved. Freedom is coming. The girl clutched the bird to a chest and wept, and across Mos Espa, similar packages began to fall like snow. Toys for the children of Tatooine. Not just any toys, but...
The Rebel Alliance had eyes everywhere, even in the Outer Rim territories the Empire considered beneath notice. When reports began flooding in about an impossible flying sleigh distributing gifts to children across Tatooine, Mon Mothma called an emergency session of the Alliance High Command. In a hidden base carved into an asteroid field near Polis Massa, holographic projections flickered to life as rebel leaders convened across the galaxy. "Is this some kind of Imperial psychological operation?" General Jan Dodonna asked, studying the grainy footage captured by a rebel spy. The image showed Santa's sleigh weaving through TIE fighter fire, packages falling like rain over Mos Espa. "If it is, it's the strangest one they've ever attempted," Admiral Akbar replied, his amphibious features creased with confusion. "Our intelligence suggests the Empire is actively hunting this Santa Claus. Vader himself engaged the target on Tatooine and failed to capture or destroy it." Princess Leia Organa leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. At 19 years old, she'd already seen enough Imperial atrocities to fill a lifetime, but something about this story resonated differently. "What do we know about his capabilities?" A Bothan intelligence officer activated another holo projection. "According to multiple sources, he's immune to force powers. Vader attempted to use telekinesis. It had no effect. His vessel moves at speeds that defy our understanding of physics, and he seems capable of materializing objects from thin air. Most significantly, he appears to have detailed knowledge of individuals he's never met. He knew a stormtrooper's family situation without accessing any database." "Sounds like a force ability," someone muttered. "It's not the Force," Leia said quietly, and everyone turned to look at her. She'd been raised by Bail Organa, trained subtly in recognizing Force sensitivity, even if she couldn't yet access it herself. "It's not the Force. I can feel it through the reports, through the testimony. This is something else, something older." Mon Mothma's hologram nodded slowly. "The question is whether this being is an ally, an enemy, or simply a wild card we cannot afford during our campaign against the Empire. Leia, you're closest to the situation. Take the Tantive 4 and make contact. If he's genuine, we may have found an unexpected advantage. If he's a threat, we need to know immediately." "Understood," Leia replied, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "What should I offer him?" "The truth," Mon Mothma said simply. "Tell him about the children suffering under Imperial rule across the galaxy. If his mission is truly to bring joy to the young, then perhaps our goals align." 3 days later, the Tantive 4 dropped out of hyperspace near Dantooine, following the trail of reported Santa sightings that stretched across a dozen systems. Leia stood on the bridge, watching the sensors for any sign of the anomalous vessel. Captain Antilles stood beside her, nervous despite the diplomatic corvette's limited firepower making them theoretically neutral. "Princess, we're receiving a signal, audio only. It's sleigh bells?" Leia straightened. "Open a channel." The melodious chiming filled the bridge, and then a warm, jovial voice crackled through the speakers. "Ah, Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan. I was wondering when you'd come looking for me. Your heart has been calling out so loudly these past few days. Hope mixed with desperation, determination mixed with fear. You carry quite a burden for one so young." Leia's composure never wavered, though several crew members exchanged startled glances. "Santa Claus, I presume. I represent the Alliance to restore the Republic. We'd like to meet with you to discuss your intentions in our galaxy." "Intentions, my dear girl? My intentions are the same as they've always been, to bring joy to children, to reward goodness, and to remind people that wonder still exists. Though I must say your galaxy makes that task considerably more challenging than Earth ever did." "Then you'll understand why we're fighting," Leia pressed. "The Empire has enslaved entire species, destroyed families, and turned childhood into a training ground for obedience and fear. If you truly care about children, you should know what they're suffering under Imperial rule." There was a pause, and when Santa spoke again, his voice had lost some of his cheerfulness. "I know, Princess. I've seen it. Every child on every world, I can feel their hearts, their pain, their dimming hope. It's why I've been working so hard these past 72 hours. Do you know how many children live in this galaxy? Trillions, and almost every single one of them has been touched by your Empire's darkness." "Then help us fight them," Leia urgently said. "Your abilities, whatever they are, could turn the tide of this war. We have resources, intelligence, allies across 100 systems. Together, we could—" "Could what?" Santa's voice was gentle but firm. "Could overthrow the Emperor? Could defeat Vader? Could restore the Republic and bring peace? Princess Leia, I've been alive for a very, very long time. I've watched civilizations rise and fall on Earth. I've seen wars fought over ideology, religion, resources, and pride. And I've learned something important. Lasting change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up. It comes from children who remember what it means to hope, who grow up believing the galaxy can be better, who refuse to accept darkness as inevitable." The Tantive 4 suddenly lurched as the sleigh materialized directly off the port bow. No hyperspace reversion, no sublight approach, simply there as though it had always been. The reindeer hung suspended in the void of space, somehow breathing, somehow alive despite the vacuum. Santa waved from the driver's seat, his red coat stark against the stars. "Permission to come aboard?" his voice asked cheerfully through the comm. Leia exchanged a glance with Captain Antilles, then nodded. "Docking Bay 2, we'll meet you there." The sleigh drifted down through the Tantive 4's shields as though they didn't exist, settling gently onto the hangar deck. The reindeer stamped their hooves on the metal floor, looking around with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand exactly where they were. Santa climbed down, brushing cosmic frost from his coat, and smiled as Leia approached with an armed escort. "No need for the guards, Princess. I'm here as a friend. Though I appreciate your caution, it's a dangerous galaxy you live in." Up close, Leia was struck by the sheer presence of the man. He looked exactly like the legends from Earth's transmissions that some xenoarchaeologists had intercepted, rotund, bearded, twinkling eyes. But there was something ancient in that gaze, something that had seen millennia pass and remained fundamentally, impossibly kind. "You said you know what the children of this galaxy are suffering," Leia began, her diplomatic training keeping her voice steady. "Then you must understand why the rebellion exists. We're not fighting for power or glory. We're fighting so that those children can grow up free." "I do understand, Princess," Santa replied, walking slowly around the hangar, examining the rebel equipment with interest. "But I also understand that war has a cost, Princess. Every battle you fight, every Imperial facility you destroy, there are children caught in the crossfire. Sons and daughters of stormtroopers who never come home, young ones living on worlds that become battlefields. Your cause is just, but the path to justice is soaked in blood." Leia's jaw tightened. "We don't have the luxury of pacifism. The Empire won't negotiate. They won't reform. They'll keep tightening their grip until every spark of freedom is extinguished."
"Perhaps," Santa conceded, "but consider this. What if there was another way? Not to avoid the fight. I'm not naive enough to think the Emperor will simply surrender, but to ensure that when you win, the galaxy is ready to be free. Right now, you're fighting to restore the old republic, but the old republic failed, didn't it? Corruption, complacency, the Jedi's blindness, all of it led to Palpatine's rise. What makes you think the next republic will be different? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Leia had asked herself the same thing 100 times in the dark hours between missions, but hearing it spoken aloud by this strange being made it impossible to dismiss. "Because we'll learn from those mistakes," she said finally. "Because people like my father, like Mon Mothma, like everyone in the Alliance believes in something better." Santa's expression softened. "Your father, Bail Organa, is a good man. I visited Alderaan yesterday. Beautiful world, by the way, though the winters could use more snow. I left gifts for the children there, the young ones in the universities who secretly distribute rebel propaganda, the orphans your father supports through anonymous donations. They have hope because people like you fight for them." He reached into his coat and pulled out a data chip, handing it to Leia. "This contains locations of every Imperial black site where they're training child soldiers, every youth indoctrination center, every place where childhood is being weaponized. I've been mapping them as I travel. Perhaps the rebellion can use this information, not to attack necessarily, but to plan, to be ready for the day when you win and need to undo the damage." Leia took the chip, her mind already racing with the intelligence value. This could save thousands of lives. Why give this to us?" "Because I believe in your cause, Princess. I just don't believe that military victory alone will save this galaxy. You need to win the hearts and minds, too. You need to remind people, especially children, what they're fighting for. Not just freedom from the Empire, but freedom to dream, to play, to be young without fear." An alarm suddenly blared through the ship. Captain Antellus's voice crackled over the intercom. "Princess, we have Imperial Star Destroyers reverting from hyperspace. Multiple contacts, led by the Devastator. They found us." Santa sighed deeply, his cheerful demeanor giving way to something more serious. "I'm afraid they followed me, Princess. The Emperor has become rather obsessed with capturing me. He sees my magic as a threat to his power, and he's not wrong. But I won't let your ship be destroyed because of me." "We can jump to hyperspace," Leia said urgently. "Captain, prepare for—" "No time. They're jamming our hyperdrive motivators. We're trapped." Through the hangar's atmospheric shield, Leia could see the massive wedge shapes of Star Destroyers moving into formation, TIE fighters already launching in swarms. The Tantive 4 was fast, and diplomatic immunity might delay them briefly, but Vader would tear the ship apart looking for Santa. Santa climbed back onto his sleigh, the reindeer already sensing the urgency. "I'll lead them away. They want me, not you. Once I'm clear, you should be able to jump." "They'll destroy you," protested Leia. Santa's smile returned, though it carried a hint of steel. "Princess, I've been doing this job for over 1,000 years. I've navigated blizzards that would freeze starships solid, avoided military radar on 6 continents, and delivered presents to children in war zones. The Empire is dangerous, but they've never faced Christmas magic before. Besides," his eyes twinkled, "the Emperor just made my naughty list, and I have a very special delivery planned for him." The sleigh lifted off, bells chiming despite the alarm klaxons. Rudolph's nose blazed red, bright enough to illuminate the entire hangar. Santa called back over his shoulder, "Tell your alliance that I'll help how I can, Princess, but my way, not yours. Keep fighting for freedom. I'll fight for joy.
Between us, maybe we can save this galaxy after all." The sleigh shot out of the hangar at impossible speed, and immediately every TIE fighter and turbo-laser battery on 3 Star Destroyers locked onto it. Vader's voice boomed across Imperial frequencies. "All ships, concentrate fire. I want that sleigh disabled and captured now." The battle that followed would be debated in Rebel and Imperial command rooms for months. Santa's sleigh danced through turbo-laser fire like a leaf on the wind, impossible to hit, impossible to predict. Every time TIE fighters closed in, packages materialized and burst open, some releasing blinding glitter clouds that fouled sensors, others deploying holographic decoys of dozens of identical sleighs. The reindeer seemed to understand tactics better than most pilots, splitting formation and reuniting in patterns that defied Imperial combat doctrine. And through it all, Santa laughed, not cruelly, but with genuine joy, as though this was the most fun he'd had in years. The Tantive 4 used the distraction to jump to hyperspace, carrying Leia and the precious intelligence chip to safety. As the Rebel corvette vanished into the star-streaked tunnel of hyperspace, Leia watched the sensor ghost of Santa's sleigh still weaving through Imperial fire, still impossibly free. "Who is he really?" Captain Antelis wondered aloud. Leia shook her head slowly, a small smile crossing her face despite the danger they'd just escaped. "I don't know, but I think he might be exactly what this galaxy needs. Hope wrapped in red velvet and delivered with a smile." Behind them, Santa finally broke contact with the Imperial fleet, his sleigh vanishing into a shimmer of Christmas magic that no Navi-computer could track. But he left behind him something in his wake. Millions of packages falling toward inhabited worlds across the sector. Gifts for children who'd never received gifts. Toys that would spark imagination. Books that would teach critical thinking. Instruments that would inspire art. And in each package, a note. "You are not alone. You are not forgotten. Better days are coming." The Emperor, receiving reports of the failure, allowed himself a thin smile. This Santa Claus was proving more interesting than anticipated, and the dark side thrived on interesting challenges. "Let him run," Palpatine commanded. "Let him spread his hope. It will make crushing it all the sweeter when I finally understand his power and take it for myself." The hunt was just beginning.
The Emperor's throne room on Coruscant was a cathedral of darkness, designed to diminish all who entered. Vast and empty, lit only by the faint glow of the city planet visible through towering windows, it forced visitors to walk across hundreds of meters of polished floor while Palpatine watched from his elevated seat. It was psychological warfare made architecture, and it had broken the spirits of senators, generals, and Jedi alike. Santa Claus walked that distance with unhurried steps, his boots clicking softly on the obsidian floor, utterly undiminished. He'd surrendered himself 3 days ago, transmitting his coordinates directly to Imperial Center with a simple message. "I believe it's time we talked, Emperor. Mano a mano, as they say. You want to understand my magic? I want to understand your darkness. Let's make a deal. You grant me an audience, and I'll come willingly. No tricks, no escapes. Just an honest conversation between two beings who've shaped the destiny of countless lives." Palpatine had been intrigued enough to accept, though he'd surrounded the throne room with 100 royal guards, stationed 3 Star Destroyers in orbit, and had Vader standing in the shadows, lightsaber ready. The Emperor took no chances, even with beings who claimed benevolent intent, especially with beings who claimed benevolent intent. Santa stopped at the base of the throne, tilting his head back to look up at the shriveled figure wrapped in black robes. This close, he could see what the Emperor truly was, a wound in reality, a black hole of malevolence that consumed light and hope and twisted them into suffering. The dark side radiated from Palpatine like heat from a furnace, and Santa felt it trying to press against his magic, seeking weakness, seeking entry. It found none. Christmas magic and the Force were like oil and water, fundamentally incompatible. "So," Palpatine rasped, his yellow eyes gleaming with predatory interest, "the mysterious Santa Claus finally graces us with his presence. I must confess, you're exactly as the children's stories describe. Red suit, white beard, jolly demeanor. Tell me, is it a costume, or are you truly so absurd?" Santa smiled, unruffled by the insult. "I've been called worse, Your Majesty, and yes, this is who I am, though I prefer whimsical to absurd. The red suit helps children spot me. The beard grew naturally over the centuries, and the jolly demeanor, that's earned through seeing the best in people, even when they work very hard to hide it." "The best in people?" Palpatine repeated mockingly. "What a quaint philosophy! Tell me, Santa Claus, in your 1,000 years of observing humanity, have you not noticed that people are fundamentally selfish, cruel, and driven by base desires? That the strong inevitably dominate the weak? That order can only be maintained through fear?" "I've noticed that people are complicated," Santa replied, settling himself cross-legged on the floor, as though he were sitting by a fireplace rather than before a galactic tyrant. The casual posture was itself an act of defiance. He refused to crane his neck in supplication. "I've seen selfishness, yes, but I've also seen parents work themselves to exhaustion to give their children better lives. I've seen strangers risk everything to save people they've never met. I've seen children share their last toy with a friend in need. The capacity for evil exists, Emperor, but so does the capacity for profound goodness. You've built an empire on fear, but fear is exhausting. It requires constant reinforcement, constant cruelty. Love and joy are self-sustaining." Palpatine leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Pretty words, yet you cannot deny the effectiveness of my methods. I have brought order to a galaxy that was tearing itself apart. The Republic was corrupt, inefficient, and paralyzed by endless debate. I cut through that weakness and created something strong." "You created a prison," Santa said quietly, "and you've appointed yourself warden. But here's what you don't understand, Emperor. Prisons always have breaking points. The tighter you squeeze, the more desperately people will fight to breathe. Your empire is built on the suffering of trillions, and suffering breeds desperation. Desperation breeds revolution. You're not creating stability, you're creating the conditions for your own downfall." The temperature in the throne room dropped. Frost began forming on the windows. Vader shifted in the shadows, recognizing the signs of his master's anger. "Bold words from someone who surrendered himself into my custody," Palpatine hissed. "You claim your magic makes you immune to the Force, but you're still flesh and blood. You can still be hurt, captured, or studied. My scientists are already preparing laboratories to dissect whatever makes you special, and once I understand your power, I will use it. Imagine the Emperor of the Galaxy, able to know every child's heart, to appear anywhere instantly, to create endless resources from nothing. Your magic would make my empire truly eternal." Santa's expression grew sad. "That's not how Christmas magic works, Emperor. It's not a tool to be wielded or a weapon to be stolen. It flows from genuine care for children, from authentic joy in their happiness. You can't fake it, can't force it, can't corrupt it. The moment you tried to use my power for domination, it would simply stop working, like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. We shall see, Palpatine gestured, and the royal guards moved forward, their force pikes crackling with energy. Take him to the detention level. Prepare him for... Santa raised a hand, and the guards stopped mid-step, not frozen by the Force, not paralyzed by fear, but simply convinced that stopping was the right thing to do. Santa's magic worked through the heart, not the mind, and somewhere in each guard's heart was a memory of childhood, of wonder, of a time before they became instruments of tyranny. "Before your guards take me," Santa said, standing smoothly, "I'd like to give you, Emperor, a gift. It's a Christmas tradition, you see. Everyone gets a gift, even those on the naughty list. Though I must warn you, gifts for the naughty are rarely what they expect." He reached into his coat. Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber, but Palpatine raised a withered hand to stop him, and pulled out a small wrapped package, coal-black paper, tied with silver ribbon. He placed it on the obsidian floor and stepped back. "Open it or don't, but know this. I came here not because I feared you, but because I wanted you to understand something. You've spent decades trying to crush hope, to extinguish joy, to make this galaxy forget what it means to dream. But you can't. Not really, because hope isn't fragile like you think it is. It's resilient. It survives in the smallest places, in a child's laughter, in a rebel's defiance, in the moment a stormtrooper questions his orders."
Palpatine's eyes narrowed. "Your optimism is your weakness, Santa Claus. Hope without power is meaningless. And power without hope is empty," Santa countered. "But we're not going to resolve this through debate, are we? You're going to try to break me, to study me, to understand me, and I'm going to let you try. Because there's someone in this building who needs to see that darkness doesn't have to win. Someone who's forgotten he was once a child with dreams." Vader stepped forward from the shadows, his respirator hissing like a mechanical growl. "If you're referring to me, old man, you're wasting your time. I told you on Tatooine, Anakin Skywalker is dead." Santa turned to face the Dark Lord, and his expression was infinitely gentle. "I don't believe that, Anakin. I can still see the boy you were. The boy who built a protocol droid to help his mother. The boy who risked his life in a pod race to save strangers. The boy who dreamed of freeing all the slaves. That boy is still inside you, buried under pain and rage and self-hatred, but still there, still hoping, even if you won't admit it." Vader's breathing grew ragged, his fist clenched. "You know nothing of what I've endured, what I've sacrificed, what I've become." "I know you did it all for love," Santa said softly. "You fell to the dark side trying to save Padme. You became a monster because you couldn't bear to lose her. That's not evil, Anakin. That's tragedy. Evil would be if you'd never loved at all. Evil would be if you'd become this without caring about anyone. But you cared so much that it destroyed you. And caring is the first step back to the light." "Enough!" Palpatine's voice cracked like a whip. Lightning erupted from his fingertips, blue-white arcs of dark-side energy that should have reduced Santa to ash. The Force lightning struck Santa's chest and dissipated harmlessly, absorbed into his red coat like water into a sponge. Santa didn't even flinch. "Your lightning doesn't work on me, Emperor," Santa said calmly. "Neither does your hate. I'm not part of your Force, not subject to your dark side. I'm something you've never encountered before, a being whose power comes entirely from love and joy, and those are forces you cannot comprehend, let alone control." Palpatine rose from his throne, his face contorted with rage. "Then I will destroy you the old-fashioned way. Vader, kill him, slowly." Vader ignited his lightsaber and advanced. Santa didn't move, didn't raise his hands in defense. He simply looked at Vader with those ancient, knowing eyes. "You don't have to do this, Anakin. You always have a choice." "I have no choice," Vader roared and struck. The crimson blade descended towards Santa's neck and stopped. Not because Vader couldn't complete the motion, but because something in him hesitated. A memory, crystal clear and devastating, surfaced from the depths of his broken mind. Shmi Skywalker, his mother, telling him a story about a magical man who rewarded good children. "If you're kind, Annie, if you help others, wonderful things will come to you." He'd believed that once, before the Tuskens, before the Jedi, before Padme's death. In that moment of hesitation, Santa reached up and gently pushed the lightsaber aside. Not with magic, not with force, but with a simple physical touch that Vader could have easily resisted. He didn't. "You were on my nice list, Anakin, right up until the moment you marched on the Jedi Temple. You'd made mistakes before that. Anger, fear, attachment the Jedi forbade, which are natural to any heart, but you were still fundamentally good. You can be good again. It's not too late." "It is too late," Vader whispered, his voice breaking. "I've killed younglings. I've destroyed worlds. I've hunted down everyone I ever loved. There's no redemption for me." "There's always redemption for those who seek it, but you have to want it. You have to choose it. I can't force goodness on anyone. That would defeat the entire purpose. So I'm asking you, Anakin Skywalker, in front of your master and the Force itself, do you want to keep being Darth Vader, or do you want to remember who you were meant to be?" The throne room fell silent except for Vader's mechanical breathing. Palpatine watched with narrowed eyes, calculating whether his apprentice was about to betray him. The royal guards tensed, ready to strike on command. And Vader stood frozen between two destinies, the lightsaber trembling in his grip. Finally, Vader deactivated the blade. "I can't, not yet. The path back is too steep. The guilt is too heavy." "Then I'll wait," Santa said simply. "I'm very patient, and when you're ready, if you're ever ready, my offer stands. Goodness isn't a door that locks behind you, Anakin. It's always open. You just have to walk through it." Palpatine's fury exploded. More lightning, stronger this time, channeling decades of accumulated dark side power. The energy filled the throne room, crackling across every surface, seeking to obliterate this being who dared defy him. But Santa stood untouched in the center of the storm, his red suit glowing faintly with a light that had nothing to do with electricity. And then, from the black-wrapped package on the floor, something stirred. The gift began to unwrap itself, the paper falling away to reveal a mirror, ancient, ornate, framed in silver. Its surface rippled like water, and in its reflection, Palpatine saw something he hadn't seen in 50 years, his own face. Not the wizened, corrupted mask of the Emperor, but Sheev Palpatine as he'd been before the dark side consumed him. Young, unremarkable, almost handsome in an ordinary way. Human. And in that reflected face were eyes that held not power or cunning, but something far terrible, doubt. The reflection showed him a question he'd spent his entire life refusing to ask. What if I'd chosen differently?
Palpatine staggered back, the lightning cutting off abruptly. "Take it away. Destroy it." But the mirror remained, reflecting not just past, but possibility. In its surface, images flickered. A Palpatine who'd used his political genius to genuinely help the Republic. A Palpatine who'd become a teacher, guiding students without manipulation. A Palpatine who'd channeled his ambition into creation rather than destruction. Lives he could have lived, choices he could have made. That's your gift, Emperor. The truth of what you gave up when you chose the dark side. The life you could have had if you'd cared about anything other than power. It won't hurt you, won't force you to change, but it will always be there, reminding you that you chose this. Every moment of loneliness, every hollow victory, every triumph that tastes like ash, you chose them all. Palpatine looked away from the mirror, but its presence remained like a wound in his carefully constructed reality. Guards, take him to detention block AA-23, maximum security. No one speaks to him, no one approaches him. He is to be studied, nothing more. As the guards surrounded Santa, he smiled, not with triumph, but with genuine compassion. "I'll be here when you're ready to talk again, Emperor. Both of you." He glanced at Vader. "Merry Christmas, even in the darkness, especially in the darkness." They led him away, the jolly man in red walking between armed guards like a prisoner. But somehow, watching him go, both Palpatine and Vader felt like they were the ones who'd been imprisoned. And throughout the galaxy, children awoke to find gifts by their beds, wrapped in paper that shimmered with impossible light. Gifts that reminded them the galaxy was bigger than the Empire, that wonder still existed, that someone, somewhere, cared about their joy. The rebellion of hope had begun.
The detention block AA-23 was designed to hold Force-sensitive prisoners, Jedi survivors, rogue inquisitors, anyone whose connection to the Force made them dangerous. The walls were lined with cortosis ore that disrupted Force abilities, and the energy field across the cell door was calibrated to respond to any attempt at telekinesis or mind tricks. It was the most secure prison in the Imperial Palace, a black site where enemies of the Empire vanished without trial or record. Santa sat cross-legged on the metal bench, humming Christmas carols to himself. He'd been here for 6 days, and in that time he'd been subjected to every form of analysis the Empire possessed. Scanners that couldn't read his biosignature, blood samples that evaporated before they could be tested, interrogation droids whose questions he answered with perfect honesty, which somehow made the answers more confusing. The lead scientist, a gaunt Umbaran named Dr. Shakrev, had declared Santa a scientific impossibility that refuses to stop existing. But Santa wasn't concerned with his imprisonment. He was waiting, and more importantly, working. Every night, while the Imperial Palace slept under the artificial darkness of Coruscant's controlled sky, Santa's magic reached out across the galaxy. Not to escape, he'd promised an honest conversation, and Santa Claus never broke his promises, but to continue his mission. His sleigh sat in an impound hangar 3 levels down, the reindeer kept in a specialized containment field that failed every few hours for reasons the technicians couldn't explain. But Santa didn't need the sleigh to deliver gifts. His magic was his power, and belief was his fuel. On Lothal, a young boy named Ezra Bridger woke to find a wooden energy slingshot by his bedside, perfectly balanced, inscribed with words he couldn't quite read but somehow understood, for protecting others. He'd been stealing to survive for years, but something about that gift made him wonder if he could be more than a thief.
On Mandalore, children of Death Watch warriors found Beskar toys, tiny helmets and armor pieces that taught them their heritage could be about honor, not just violence. Their parents examined the gifts suspiciously, but couldn't find anything dangerous, just toys, reminders of what they fought for. On Coruscant itself, in the lower levels where sunlight never reached, orphans discovered packages containing glow rods that never dimmed, blankets that stayed warm without power, and food that somehow never spoiled, small miracles that made life bearable. And in the Rebel Alliance, Princess Leia found herself thinking about Santa's words more than she cared to admit. He'd been right. Military victory alone wouldn't save the galaxy. They needed to win hearts, especially the hearts of the next generation. She'd begun implementing new protocols. Rebel cells were now required to minimize civilian casualties, to document imperial atrocities for future trials, to think about what came after the war. Mon Mothma had noticed the shift and approved. Perhaps that strange being gave us more than intelligence, she'd mused. Perhaps he gave us perspective. In the detention block, the door hissed open. Santa looked up from his humming to see Darth Vader standing in the entrance, backlit by the corridor's harsh lighting. The Dark Lord entered slowly, the door sealing behind him, and for a long moment neither spoke. Finally, Vader's respirator broke the silence. "The Emperor wants you broken. He sent his best interrogators, his most sophisticated equipment. None of it works. Why?" "Because you can't break someone who has nothing to hide," Santa replied gently. "I've told your scientists everything they asked. I'm exactly what I appear to be, an immortal being whose purpose is bringing joy to children. There's no hidden agenda, no secret weakness. I simply am." Vader paced the small cell like a caged predator. "Nothing is that simple. Everyone wants something. Power, survival, revenge, love. Something drives every being. What drives you?" "Joy," Santa said immediately. "Not my own joy, though I do find happiness in my work. The joy of children. The moment a child's face lights up on Christmas morning. The way their hearts open to wonder and possibility. That's what I live for. That's what sustains me." "Foolish," Vader rasped. "Children grow up. Wonder fades. Reality crushes dreams. You're extending false hope to beings who will only suffer more when they realize the galaxy is cruel and indifferent." Santa tilted his head, studying Vader with those ancient eyes. "Is that what happened to you, Anakin? Did someone crush your dreams? Did reality prove too harsh for the boy who wanted to free all the slaves?" "Stop calling me that name." But there was less conviction in Vader's voice than before. "It's your name," Santa said softly. "The name your mother gave you. Shmi Skywalker, a slave who never lost her kindness, who raised a son to believe in helping others despite living in chains herself. She would be heartbroken to see what you've become." Vader's fist slammed into the wall, leaving a dent in the reinforced metal. "My mother is dead, killed by savages while the Jedi did nothing. And when I finally had the power to save someone I loved, the Force itself betrayed me. Padme died anyway, and I was left with this," he gestured at his mechanical body, "this prison of life support and machinery. Don't speak to me of dreams, old man. Dreams are lies we tell ourselves to make suffering bearable."
"No," Santa said firmly, standing now. "Dreams are visions of what could be. They're not guarantees, Anakin. They're possibilities. Your mother dreamed you'd be free, and you were. Your mother dreamed you'd do great things, and you did. You became one of the finest Jedi of your generation, a hero of the Clone Wars. Yes, you fell. Yes, you made terrible choices, but those dreams weren't lies. They were real, and they shaped you into someone capable of extraordinary good. That capacity still exists." "I've killed too many, done too much." Vader's voice was barely a whisper through the respirator. "Even if I wanted redemption, and I don't, there's no path back. The Jedi are gone. The light side would reject me, and the Emperor would destroy me the moment I showed weakness." Santa stepped closer until he was standing directly in front of the Dark Lord. At this distance, he could feel the pain radiating from Vader like heat from a furnace, physical pain from his injuries, but also emotional anguish so deep that it had calcified into hatred. "The light side doesn't reject Anakin. People reject themselves. They decide they're not worthy, and so they never try. But I've seen your heart. Beneath all the darkness, all the anger, all the self-loathing, there's still a spark. The same spark that made you build C-3PO to help your mother. The same spark that risked your life in the Battle of Naboo. That spark never dies. It only gets buried, and buried things can be unearthed." "Even if what you say is true," Vader said slowly, "what would you have me do? Betray the Emperor? Join the rebellion? Become some symbol of hope for a galaxy I helped subjugate? It's absurd."
"I don't have a specific plan for you, Anakin. That's not how redemption works. It's not a mission briefing or a tactical objective. It starts with a single moment of choosing differently. Maybe it's letting a rebel escape when you could have caught them. Maybe it's questioning an order you know is evil. Maybe it's just acknowledging that you hate what you've become and want to change. Small steps taken in private where no one else sees. But they add up, and eventually those small steps lead somewhere new." Vader turned away, his cape swirling. "You waste your breath. I came here because the Emperor commanded me to try again, to break you, to find some psychological leverage, but you're either the most sincere being I've ever encountered or the most sophisticated liar. I haven't decided which." "I'm sincere," Santa said with a smile. "Always have been. It's easier than lying. You don't have to remember what you said." Despite everything, a sound emerged from Vader that might have been a laugh, brief, bitter, but genuine. "The Emperor fears you, you know. He won't admit it, but I can sense it. You represent something he can't control, can't corrupt, can't destroy. It terrifies him in a way the rebellion never could." "Good," Santa said quietly. "He should be afraid, not of me personally. I'm not here to fight him, but of what I represent. The idea that his power is temporary, that darkness always loses to light in the end, that love is stronger than hate. Those aren't just pretty philosophies, Anakin. They're fundamental truths of existence. The Emperor has built an empire on denying those truths, but denial doesn't change reality. It only delays the inevitable." The cell door opened again, and a squad of royal guards entered. "Lord Vader, the Emperor requires your presence. The prisoner is to be transferred to the research facility." Vader nodded, then paused at the doorway. Without turning back, he spoke one last time. "If you're right about redemption, about it never being too late, then you're saying even the Emperor could change. Do you believe that?"
Santa considered the question carefully. I believe everyone has the capacity for change, but not everyone chooses to exercise it. Palpatine has spent so long being the Emperor, feeding on suffering and domination, that I'm not sure there's enough of Sheev left to save. But Anakin Skywalker, the boy who loved his mother, who married in secret because his heart was too full to contain, who cried when he cut down Count Dooku because it violated his principles, that boy can still choose differently. Vader left without responding, but Santa noticed the slight hitch in his respirator, the catch of breath that might have been suppressed emotion. The guards led Santa through corridors of sterile white and imperial gray, deeper into the palace's research levels. But as they walked, Santa smiled to himself. The conversation had gone exactly as he'd hoped. Seeds planted, doubts nurtured, the smallest crack in Vader's armor of self-hatred. Christmas magic didn't work through grand gestures alone. It worked through small kindnesses that accumulated into transformation, through one person choosing to believe in possibility despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And all across the galaxy, those moments were multiplying. On the Executor, Vader's flagship, a junior officer found a package in his quarters. Inside was a holo projection of his daughter's first steps, something he'd missed while on deployment. He wept openly, and his squad mates didn't report him for emotional weakness. Instead, they shared their own gifts, pictures of loved ones, toys for children they'd never met, reminders that they were more than cogs in the Imperial machine. On Scarif, where the Empire built its superweapons in secret, a child of an Imperial engineer discovered a telescope, not a military-grade sensor array, but a simple telescope for stargazing. She pointed it to the sky and saw not strategic targets, but beauty, wonder, the infinite possibility of worlds beyond her father's weapons. And on Alderaan, Senator Bail Organa received a message from his adopted daughter Leia. She was implementing new rebel protocols focused on protecting children, on building a better future rather than just destroying the present. "We met someone who reminded us what we're really fighting for," she wrote. "Not vengeance, not even justice. Hope. Simple, stubborn, impossible hope." In his meditation chamber aboard the Devastator, Darth Vader sat in darkness and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. Santa's words echoed in his mind, particularly one phrase: "That capacity still exists." Did it? Was there truly anything left of Anakin Skywalker to salvage? He reached out with the Force, not seeking enemies or planning strategies, but simply feeling the galaxy. And for the first time since Mustafar, he noticed something beneath the pain and darkness, a whisper, faint, almost imperceptible, but there. The voice of Padme, not from beyond death, but from memory. "There's still good in you, I know it." Vader's respirator hitched, his hands trembled, and in the privacy of his chamber where no one could see, Darth Vader allowed himself the smallest moment of grief for the man he had been, the boy who dreamed of helping people, the Jedi who wanted to save everyone, the man who loved so deeply it destroyed him. "Is it really not too late?" he whispered to the darkness. The darkness didn't answer, but somewhere across the stars, Santa smiled. In the Imperial Research Facility, scientists prepared their equipment to study the anomaly called Santa Claus. They would fail, of course. You cannot dissect wonder, you cannot quantify joy, and you cannot imprison something that exists in the hearts of believers across the galaxy.
But the Emperor would keep trying, and in his trying, in his obsessive need to control even something as pure as Christmas magic, he would reveal the fundamental weakness of his empire: fear. Fear that something existed beyond his power, fear that his control was an illusion, fear that in the end all his darkness would be swept away by something as simple and unstoppable as a child's laughter. The rebellion was growing, not just of soldiers and starships, but of hearts remembering what it meant to hope. And at the center of it all, a being in a red suit sat patiently in a cell, humming Silent Night to himself, waiting for the moment when the galaxy would finally be ready to choose light over darkness. That moment was coming, slowly, inevitably, like dawn breaking over a frozen landscape. Christmas was coming to the Star Wars galaxy, and nothing, not the Emperor, not the dark side, not the full might of the Imperial military, could stop it.
The war between the Empire and the Rebellion would rage for years to come. Planets would burn, heroes would fall. The Death Star would cast its shadow across the galaxy, and brave souls would rise to oppose it. But something fundamental had shifted the moment Santa Claus entered the Star Wars galaxy. A shift so subtle that historians would debate whether it even mattered. Except it did matter, profoundly. In the detention facility, Santa remained patient, his presence a constant reminder that some powers transcended the Force itself. The Emperor continued his futile attempts to understand Christmas magic, never realizing that understanding required the one thing he'd abandoned: genuine love. And Darth Vader stood at a crossroads he didn't yet know existed, carrying the weight of one impossible question: what if redemption was real? Across the galaxy, children who'd received Santa's gifts grew up differently. They remembered that someone cared about their joy. They passed that memory to others. They became rebels, reformers, and revolutionaries, not through violence alone, but through stubborn insistence that the galaxy could be better. Santa had planted seeds in the darkest soil. Now he would wait for them to bloom. Because Christmas magic was patient, and in a galaxy far, far away, hope had found its most unlikely champion, a jolly man in red who refused to stop believing in goodness, even when surrounded by darkness. The Force would have its prophecy, the rebellion would have its victories, but Santa Claus had given them something even more powerful: the certainty that joy, once kindled, could never be completely extinguished. And in the end, that would make all the difference. May the Force be with you. More stories await.